Good afternoon, and I want to thank the organizer for including me in this presentation this afternoon. I'm going to be talking about a topic which is of no interest in California. The rest of the US likes the idea. In Iran, they like the idea. In the Middle East, they like the idea. But you can't talk about it in California, and I'm very glad that you're here to listen to me. So this has to do with what has happened over the last 10, 15 years that has made the United States of America self-sufficient, almost, in oil and gas production. That has only happened through innovations, and I'm proud to tell you that many of people who contributed to bring it to this level were Iranian. But the life of all of us actually depends, among other things, among oxygen and other things, depends really on power, plastic, and transportation, PPT. Many of you thought PPT was PowerPoint, but that's really what it is. Our civilization today really highly depends on energy. All of the Silicon Valley and Silicon Beach and electronics and everything over here requires power. You probably heard about what the tornado did or the hurricane did to South Carolina. They were out of power. Just imagine for a couple of days you're out of power. You can't turn on your cell phone, you can't charge them, you can't run your computers. So power is a very essential part of where we are, who we are. Thank you. The next thing is plastics. If it wasn't for the invention of plastics, we would not have the healthcare industry as we have it today. Just visit any hospital, you can see how dependent we are on plastics. We wouldn't have the IVs, we wouldn't have many of the things that we do. In fact, all of the electronic devices are based on plastics. And of course, there's the transportation. You all drove to get here for the conference, and you all use your cars probably, unless you flew over here, and that requires basically liquid fuel. So the invention of liquid fuel for the last 150 years really has dramatically changed the way the human civilization has been. It's interesting, we take advantage of all of this, the power, the plastics, and transportation, and yet we don't appreciate it. We don't want to talk about it. It's kind of a love-hate relationship. We'd like to have it, but we don't want to talk about it. Okay. I'm going backward now, let's see. Somebody has to fix this, let's see here. Okay, so we have, among all of the industries in the United States and the world, we call the petroleum industry. It really consists of three divisions: upstreams, and midstream, and downstream. Downstream is the refinery where it converts everything to the products, fuel, whatever you need. Midstream would be transportation. Wherever you're sitting right now, the rest of the Los Angeles, the rest of California, you'd be amazed how much pipeline is underground transporting the fuel from oil fields to the refineries. And you're not even worried about it because you think somebody like us is watching over those pipelines, making sure that there's no leakages in that. Most of our work is in upstream because if there's no upstream, if there's no production, then there is no midstream, there's no downstream. So that's really what we are focusing. See if I can. I think on every slide I gotta wait 5 minutes and see. Okay, so over the last 15, 20 years, there have been significant improvement in innovative technologies, innovations that has really changed the face of the industry. I don't know how many of you have visited an offshore platform. Some of these structures are about 200 miles away. In fact, there's a drill ship that drills and goes away and everything is subsea. There's an amazing number of engineering groups that work on these structures, from mechanical, civil, environmental, petroleum, to design them, to build them, and then, and we're going deeper and deeper and deeper. And if you just look at how much technology is involved to precisely put these platforms where they belong, and how to drill in those locations, and how to get to that resource, and how do you even know how much is under the subsea? Imagine you got about 7,000 feet of water, and you got about 25,000 feet below the sea level, and you still know what's there. That's what attracted me to petroleum engineering. This X-ray eyes. I can look under the ground. I'll tell you whether you have oil on the ground or not. There is none under this room. Okay. So this actually came out a couple of days ago. That this is the Energy Information Administration says that the United States have overtaken Russia and Saudi Arabia in terms of production. That's very significant. Because not only is significant in terms of balance of trade, the most important part about it is that what would be US policy with respect to the Middle East and the rest of the world if it becomes self-sufficient? If you no longer need the Iranian oil or Saudi oil or the Middle East oil, what would happen in that relationship? Next, okay. Now, I want you to take a look at this slide. You can see from 1996 to 2018. The lower curve in the United States, look at the production, somewhere between 4 to 6 million. The upper curve, one is Russia, one is Saudi Arabia. As you notice, there was a gap between the US production and the Russia and Saudi Arabia, somewhere between 2 to 3 million barrels a day. But look at the very end. When you get to 2018, we just exceeded Saudi Arabia and Russia. That's very significant. In other words, today, we are able to produce more than 10 million barrels a day. As many of you know, Iran produces probably about 2 million if they allow them to produce, something about 2 million. Saudis were about 8. But so it's significant to produce about more than 10 million barrels a day. Now, by the way, why are we producing that much? Because you and I need that. We need it for transportation. We need it for other uses, basically. How did that happen? How all of a sudden happened? It is even to my amazement. I've been in this business for more than 50 years. It has even amazed me that how innovations can bring us to the point that we can increase our production. And those technologies, whether it had to do with the area of environmental, whether it had to do with the new techniques for exploration, whether it has to do with basically managing the carbon capture sequestration, and whether it has to do with coming up with better methods of producing from deep water. The combination of these really have resulted in increasing the production in the United States. We are now working on reservoirs I could not have even dreamed that we can ever produce from them. And I think the difference has been technology, because now we have technologies we didn't have even 15, 20 years ago that allow us to do that. Now, if you look at this chart, you will see the oil is the one in green. After that is natural gas. Then you have the coal, and you have the biomass, and the nuclear, and the wind, and basically the hydro. Look at the size of these bars. As you can see over here, even up to 2040, and in my estimation probably for the next 100 years, because of economics, because of limitations, you can see the total contribution of what you get from hydro and from the wind and from nuclear will be limited, and you're going to be heavily depending on oil, natural gas, and coal. Now, this country, at one point, several years ago, we were actually building LNG stations so we can import natural gas to the United States. All of those plants had been scrapped. Now we are actually beginning to export natural gas. That is thanks to the discovery of new resources and the technologies that made that possible. Among the many technologies that have contributed to that are basically the IoTs, mostly automation, robotics, in terms of inspection, finding things, 3D scanning. Now we don't have to replace the whole pump. We can actually, this is what Dr. Khoshnevis does, we can actually image a certain section and come up with the repair portion. And cloud computing. In fact, it's getting to the point, I don't have to be on a rig, I can actually observe what's happening, anything, any place in the world. So you can use the technologies or the technical experts, no matter where they are, and actually use their knowledge in terms of solving the problem. So of course, these are some references, you can take a look at it. In summary, it has been through innovative work on many, many people that something major has happened in the United States, and that is the country is almost getting self-sufficient. The reason I say almost is because although we're producing more than 10 million barrels a day, we still need 15 million. So we are still importing another 5 million. Are we going to get to that point? The chances are great, because the amount of the unconventional resources we have discovered is 20 times more than the conventional reservoirs. And by the time we get them to work, we're going to get to that point. I'm very proud to tell you that some of our graduates, and I hear that talk about the entrepreneurship, that actually, as much as we try to make them academician and let them focus on research after they graduated, they're actually going in the direction of opening their own oil companies. One of them was interviewed last Sunday on the ABC radio. So I'm very proud to tell you that Iranians gradually are getting out of these restrictions they had in terms of sticking with some kind of a restricted environment of growth, and are going to actually development of their own entrepreneurship in the field of oil and gas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are going to ask the next panelist, and once all done, we're going to be on the stage. Our next distinguished speaker, Professor Yousef Bozorgnia.
All right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm pretty sure you have heard about the great book, Brief History of Time. So now this is a brief history of my time. I stole the title, and I'm glad that this morning our friends said stealing is not really a bad thing, so I feel less guilty about it. But seriously, we have heard about very diverse disciplines this morning and this afternoon. But I'm amazed that the process of innovation really is more or less identical. Process really is the same, but topics and disciplines are different. And now you're going to hear about very different discipline, which is earthquake engineering, but somehow. Okay, very good. All right, a brief history. I finished my BS degree from Sharif Ariamer University of Technology, and almost immediately, a couple of months after my graduation, I came to the US for my master and PhD degree at Berkeley. If you want to know exactly when, I tell you exactly, it was 2,500 years ago. Kurosh was still the king of Persia. No, not that long, but it was a long time ago. As I mentioned to you, at that time, it was really different era. Our goal was not just to come and get a degree and PhD degree and come back. Our goal really was to learn everything. I'm serious, everything. So I took so many courses in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. Really, it was easy for me to get PhD in those fields, but then I fell in love with earthquake engineering. But this is serious. Then I started earthquake engineering. This has been the best decision of my professional life. I'm so happy about it. Everyone said it. Do whatever really you like to do, whatever it's your passion. And that has been my passion in the last decades. So for decades, I was at Berkeley as a faculty member. For 12 years, I was executive director of largest earthquake engineering research center in the US. Now at UCLA, I'm much happier, more excitement, believe it or not. Our research projects are mainly multidisciplinary, and you hear it all in various disciplines, in medical field, in space technology, and so on. Is really multidisciplinary. We work on daily basis with geologists, seismologists, geotechnical engineers, structural engineers, mechanical engineers, fire, gas pipelines. During the earthquakes, they get fire. Social scientists, financial aspects of earthquake engineering. It's enormous. If we get an earthquake on Hayward Fault, we will lose in 30 seconds $230 billion, not million, $1 billion in 30 seconds. So financial aspects, so it's really multidisciplinary, and that is the fun part of it. Our research are multi-university. We work very, very closely with obviously UCLA, UC Berkeley, Irvine, San Diego, Caltech, Stanford, you name it. Many universities and multi-funding agencies. This is the era that we go, as other investors also said it, we go after large projects, not $20,000 research project that you write a couple of papers. Those are good, but this is really what is not going to excite us. So we go after large projects. Large projects are not funded by single funding agency. You have to go after multiple funding agencies. It's very similar to venture capitalists and investors and so on, but we do it in academia. Multi-researchers, really we work on various projects. One of the projects that we are about to finish that 55 people worked on various pieces of the puzzle. The other one that we finished it a couple of years ago, 32 people worked on that. The question is that, is it easy for the poor principal investigator? And the answer is absolutely no. You deal with real people. We are not angels. You deal with attitude. You deal with elbowing, a little bit of backstabbing, and so on. So why are we doing with ego? So why are we doing it? Because the impact is enormous. It's enormous. Large projects with 55 people is going to have impact at the national and international level, and the scientific impact also is enormous. The papers that our team published after 2008, not 30 years ago, have been cited more than 1,000 times. It's enormous. It's a painful process, but the reward is enormous. So speaking of earthquakes, I cannot give any presentation without talking about my love. Earthquakes obviously are important both in California and Iran, but they are very different in many ways. So this is the map of earthquakes in the Middle East. You see lots of earthquakes. I showed this plot a few years ago, in fact, in reunion of the Sharif University of Technology in Kish Island in Iran. And I said, Iran is the heaven of earthquake scientists. There was a reporter there the day after on radio. He said, Dr. Bozorgnia said Iran is the heaven. He cut the last part of that. So I have to be careful. Iran is the heaven of earthquake scientists. I'm not joking. I have a friend at the US Geological Survey. They love to travel to Iran to study. Whatever you see in different parts of the world, they have it. Your right-hand side, the low part, there is a huge Macron fault in the sea in 1945, created magnitude 8, and tsunami. So people who are working on, as part of the research tsunami, especially at USC, they love to travel and investigate that. South of Zagros is it's like crush zone. They get 2,000–3,000 earthquakes per year, but a smaller magnitude. And in fact, Persian Gulf, one theory is that was created because of buckling of Arabian plate, because it's pushing towards Iranian plate. Then Zagros, you get huge earthquakes, different kind. You get magnitude 7, 7.5, 7.7 easily. And then east of Iran, obviously, you have lots of earthquakes around the Lut block. So I just had literally 8 earthquakes that I didn't do investigation and research. These are the earthquakes that I'm a little bit familiar. In these 8 earthquakes, more than 128,000 people were killed. Only in these 8, which is very, very unfortunate. One of them is 2003 BAM earthquake that 2-3 days after that I visited. The entire city really was destroyed. It wasn't like the one house here, one house there. The entire city was destroyed. Very unfortunate. So I show you, this is not my research. The authors are here. My colleague Dave Wald and his PhD student have these things. Vertical axis is the fatality rate. It means that number of people get killed in an earthquake divided by the number of people exposed in that earthquake. Horizontal axis is intensity. Don't worry about the details of that. But lower intensity, obviously, lower level of ground motion and shaking. Higher intensity is higher level of ground shaking. And they divided various countries and various regions. My focus is on Iran versus California. If you go to intensity 8, which is relatively large intensity, severe motions, the chance of, on average sense, the number of people get killed in the same intensity, not the magnitude 6 versus magnitude 8. For the same intensity, on average, there are 4,400 times more people are killed in Iran than in California. One reason is that in California, for the last decades, really, this is the innovation, the progress and innovation in earthquake engineering and science and practice in the last decades really helped us to have 4,400 times less people get killed in California. So this is my last slide. I appreciate that. Then during the discussion, if you have any question, I'll be happy to try. Very good.
Thank you very much, Professor Bozorgnia. Our next distinguished speaker, Honorable Nahal Iravani-Sani.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a delight to be back here at my alma mater. I graduated from UC Irvine, and I was recalling the last time that I was probably on campus. I was wearing a heavy backpack and tennis shoes, and never would have imagined being back here in this capacity. But as they say, you never know where life's journey will take you, and being back here truly feels full circle. Thank you very much to the organizers of this event, to SUTA, the Jordan Center, and IACP. I'll be honest with you, when I first got the written invitation to serve as a panelist on this forum on innovation, it gave me pause. When you hear the word innovation, it connotes the latest cutting-edge technology, artificial intelligence, scientific breakthrough. The judiciary, on the other hand, is firmly rooted in the Constitution, precedent, established principles of law. So how could I, as a judge, meaningfully contribute to a forum on innovation? The organizers certainly didn't want me to come here and talk to you about latest and audiovisual PowerPoint technology in our Silicon Valley courtrooms. So how could I meaningfully contribute? And then I had my aha moment, or the light bulb, as the pictures show. And I thought, well, judges are supposed to serve the community. And to that extent, we're supposed to be responsive to the needs of the community that we serve, that have one way or another been brought before us in the legal system. To put things in context, in a 2014 evaluation of the California CDCR, that's the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, our prison system, it was revealed that for first-time offenders, for every offender that spent time in prison, 54% were re-incarcerated within 3 years. And that goes to show that the problem of recidivism is staggering, and it's truly problematic. So in response, collaborative courts have emerged as a way of dealing with this epidemic. Of why is it that people that go through the criminal justice system re-offend so often than not? Collaborative courts, then, is the justice system's new approach, innovative approach, if you will, of addressing the problem of recidivism and coming up with solutions to have these offenders, especially low-level offenders, be rehabilitated with a treatment component instead of just a punishment component, so that they can be reintegrated back into society. As you see, most of my talk will be focusing on our criminal justice system. Now, I know that with the caliber of the panelists and those in the audience, I don't suspect that many of you have gone through or will ever go through the criminal justice system, so you may not find this relevant. But I also do suspect that every one of you, even if not directly, perhaps indirectly through a family member or friend or someone that you know, knows of at least one person that has substance abuse issues, mental health issues, perhaps an issue with domestic violence. And to that extent, I hope that you find this presentation to be insightful on how our criminal justice system deals with these types of offenders. First, I'd like to talk to you about drug treatment courts. Drug treatment court is a revolutionary approach in which our justice system deals with people that have substance abuse issues and that they are overpowered by addiction, by addressing and taking into consideration the unique needs and the behavioral aspects associated with people with dependency issues. The regimen in drug treatment court is by a lot like parenting, by positive reinforcement for improvement and sanctions for violations. And it is closely monitored by a judge that supervises the person as they go through the system, and a whole host of treatment providers on the outside, from counselors, probation officers, a lot of what we call wraparound services. Then the offender comes back to court, the substance abuse testing is reviewed with the judge. Interestingly, urine test that results in a dirty blood test, or I'm sorry, urine test, instead of that person that has a dirty result, instead of that person getting thrown back in jail for a longer period, the treatment is elevated. Instead of going from, say, group counseling, they get to individual counseling, and it's a lot of services to help them combat their addiction issues as opposed to just throwing them in jail. And at the end of the program, it's somewhat like a graduation ceremony. The person gets a completion certificate, their speeches, family members are allowed to attend. And keep in mind, for a segment of the population that a lot of people perceive as, or just as bad, they're used to perceiving themselves as no good drug offenders. When they actually get a completion certificate, and when they actually know that they've completed a program and they're in a room full of a judge and attorneys and probation officer actually clap for them, that simple concept of having people clap for them is exhilarating and transformative. And studies have shown that it's truly had a great impact on the recidivism rate. It's gone from the 54% that I mentioned earlier down to 17% for this population. So some of you might be wondering, who pays for this? Where does the funding come from, and how effective is it? In Proposition 36, SACPA, that's the Substance Abuse Crime Prevention Act, $120 million budget was allocated for paying for these drug treatment courts and the treatment providers. And the analysis afterwards has revealed that for every $1 that's spent on somebody that merely participates in this program, $2.50 is saved by the taxpayer. For every $1 that's spent on these offenders that go all the way through and complete the program and graduate, $4 per person is saved by the taxpayer. So it truly is getting the results that we want, and it is truly cost effective for us as a society. The next type of collaborative court I'd like to talk to you about is in domestic violence courts. Domestic violence is very unique, and it has its own complexities and nuances. Unlike the typical type of crime where the victim wants to have the abuser punished and prosecuted, in these types of cases, the victim initially needs the help of law enforcement. They've been assaulted. It's been a very horrific situation at home. So they might call 911, and they might get police's involvement. But then when it makes it to the courts, they actually want to testify for the abuser. It's called the battered women syndrome, because they, and I say women or she, I use that pronoun, I realize I'm generalizing, but the majority of these victims are women, although certainly there's male victims as well. So please permit me to use the pronoun she generally. And the victims in domestic violence court because of the unique complexities in these situations, because they ultimately love the abuser, ironically, and because they ultimately have a lot of times children with the abuser and still rely on them financially, they actually don't want the person prosecuted and actually are worried that what if they come and they testify against the abuser, it's going to get worse. And the next time around, she might get a worse beating. It's very sad. So the collaborative court in domestic violence is not just to lock up the offender, but to also provide treatment, anger management. California's Penal Code Section 1203.097 specifically is the penal code section that deals with domestic violence, and it requires a 52-week domestic violence treatment program, which is counseling that deals with the unique issues of batterers, and it also sometimes requires parenting without violence program. It's intensive supervision. If there's a nexus to substance abuse or illicit substances, that is a part of the program as well. And again, the focus here is not just to punish the abuser in the traditional way of go to jail, but for the lower level ones, the first-timers, where the injury is not that bad, to give them the treatment that they need and then integrate them back into the family. Another type of collaborative court that I'd like to talk to you about, which is right here in Orange County, it's actually called the Whatever It Takes Court, literally, W-I-T, whatever it takes, and it's just very recently started, and for the Whatever It Takes court, it has to be somebody that has mental health issues, sometimes homelessness, also substance abuse, and high rate of recidivism. And at the very beginning of the program, it's a lot of intense hands-on services from educational training, vocational training, government benefits, a lot of services that is invested in these types of offenders. And then slowly, the resources are stripped away to make those offenders or clients in Whatever It Takes court more independent. And by the end of the program, they are supposed to be able to be more independent and actually pay for housing on their own because they've received vocational training and they can be contributing members of society. And I actually heard from the judge who's in charge in Orange County, Judge Kreber, that success is measured by the reduction in recidivism, which has gone from 73% in this group down to 19%. So the savings to the county for medical treatment, hospital beds, and jail beds is at a rate of $150,000 per year per participant, and that is quite impressive. In conclusion, a legal system is only as good as how effective it is in addressing the needs of the society that it seeks to address. Collaborative courts emphasize treatment as opposed to just punishment. Regularly, the criminal justice system's goal is public safety and also accountability of the offender. Traditionally, that has always been by way of keeping the public safe and holding the offender accountable by punishing them. Collaborative courts are an innovative way of addressing in the justice system is by emphasizing the rehabilitation and treatment component. And in that way, with each collaborative court, the chance of reducing the vicious cycle of reincarceration is reduced, and the hope of elevating someone and having this serve as a turning point in their life is increased. And in that way, that is social innovation that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next distinguished speaker, Professor Behrokh Khoshnevis.
Thank you. The downside of being the last speaker is that most of the audience is gone. The upside is that I can talk as long as I want. But don't worry, I won't take too long. Well, I am a technology freak. I've worked in different fields of technology with some concentration on fabrication technologies, but also in energy field, including a project in oil and gas with my honorable colleague, Dr. Ershaghi, wind energy and so on, as well as a lot of space technologies, biomedical. So rather than focusing on one of my research areas or invention areas, I'd rather talk about the general process of creativity. In the last 10 years at USC, I've been teaching a course on invention and technology development, and I have got pretty good feedback, good results. Several of my students have become good inventors, have started very successful companies, and although I never considered myself an entrepreneur because of one of my inventions, I was pushed towards creating a company, raising funds from a European multinational company. So within the time that I have, I'll try to give you a condensed version of what I think is most conducive to creative living. Okay, well, these are some of my inventions, as you notice, in dentistry, oil and gas, energy, optics, fabrication technologies, and my largest scale 3D printing construction system on which I have the company, and many grand prizes by NASA and other organizations for my inventions. Okay, so there is no doubt that creativity these days is an essential part of any kind of operating organization. In science constantly is producing new discoveries. There are other inventions that impact a particular product line, so companies have to be able to quickly adapt what happens and add value to the state of the art and create newer products. So it is not really an option to be creative these days in industry. The same holds true in every other domain, more or less. Of course, the bottom line is that creativity is what makes us different from animals. Our main difference is not that we think. Animals also think. They have a brain, you know that. But they don't create anything new. For over millions of years of being on this planet, they have not done much, while like Homo sapiens last 70,000 years till now, has gone through a lot of major revolutions, cognitive revolution, agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, today's information technology revolution, and so on. And we have come a long way in a very, very short time. So we are different kinds of species, and what makes us different is our creative ability. And it is unfortunate that most of the population of the world actually do not tap into this very precious aspect of human, being human. So I tend to believe that everybody can be a Leonardo da Vinci. And that's what I try to do, not to create Leonardo da Vinci's exactly, but to prove that in my work environment, that creativity is not in your blood. Creativity is something that can be learned and enhanced. And I have, again, proven that by the success of the graduates in my class. So I believe the foundation of creative living are three. One is intention. The other one is passion. And finally, the vision. Right, we keep hearing these words, but the true meaning of these, we have to really think about and try to see in ourselves what aspect of these three characteristics are present in us, and to what level of strength. Okay, as a result of this, the movement starts. Its movement is toward acquiring education or knowledge, you can say, and imagination gets engaged as another way of producing knowledge. So you have to have a path of enthusiasm. And with having those three, the enthusiasm will be very strong. You need the enthusiasm in order to not give up, because creative path basically involves doing new things. New things have not been done, and nobody really knows exactly how to do them. Therefore, there's a lot of failure before you hit success, usually. You have to be patient. And the only thing that will help you with that is really enthusiasm, the passion-driven passage. Okay, so what is intention? Intention is really, if you want to really understand it, look at a seed of a plant. The seed of a tree has the intention of becoming the tree. The gardener, whoever takes care of that seed, does not really know the exact mechanism of how the seed turns into a tree. It's a complex biological mechanism. But eventually, if the seed has the nutrient, sunlight, water, it's going to become a tree. You cannot change it. That intention is so strong in there. So you can look at yourself as that gardener, and you have to make sure that the seed of intention is in you. All you have to do is to take care of it and never let it die. And then automatically your system becomes aware of opportunities that are around you and absorbs them. The same way a plant leans towards where there is light, drives the root towards where there is humidity, and so on. Okay, with respect to intention, I think there are really three types of people. Type 1 are the ones who are engaged really in small play. And they do not challenge themselves. There's not much passion in them. There's not much passion to be found in them because of the small play. Type 2 are the ones who look inward to find what opportunities there are to offer to the world. And type 3, finally, are the ones that constantly look outward to find what opportunities there are to grab. So you want to be really type 2 people. People who really capitalize on their uniqueness rather than trying to copy others, trying to adopt a model. They try to see what is within themselves. So the tipping point is really that recognition, in my belief. Vision, of course, the best thing is a quote by the American visionary and thinker Helen Clare, who says, there are none so blind as those without vision. You have to have a vision of where this world should go and what part you want to play in it. Graphically, to show a life without vision every day has a number of activities. Pay the bills, go to work, come back, whatever. A life with vision has a structure, has a construct. And your vision, your vision really has to go beyond your own existence. And this is what gives you a huge energy to understand that, hey, what I'm doing here is important. Whether I'm here or not, my impact will stay. So if I were to say what truly drives me is a potential of making an impact that really drives me. It is not the money, it's not the success, or whatever people call it. I want to make sure that I have made an impact. My coming and going has made a difference. I have been engaged in NASA projects since 2004, and I definitely don't think that any of these will happen while I'm still around. But the vision of helping humanity with its future is really a good source of energy for me. So desire to making a lasting impact is actually a death-defying force that strongly promotes creativity. Passion, well, you probably have heard this, follow your passion. The saying by Albert Einstein and Nelson Mandela, who said, the small play people, chance of finding passion is really not there that much. It is only in hardship that you'll find your passion. What it is that saves you in the best of you. Everybody has some kind of passion, and that's what makes humanity very colorful. Their passions are very different. Okay, so we go to the higher level now. After passing those three is the education, gaining knowledge. We are accustomed to formal education, but the reality is that formal education is a very small part of what really builds us. What we learn in a school and in universities, whatever, may be necessary, but definitely not sufficient. The best education is the one that makes you unique, and that's the one that you take with your own initiative in a direction of your curiosity, of your passion, of your intention. And that road becomes unique. To be creative means doing things that are different. To be able to do things that are different, you have to be different. In order to be different, you have to take a different path in life, which is unique to you. Well, I'll pass this. Yeah, this famous saying by Mark Twain, I never let my schooling interfere with my education. So another aspect of gaining knowledge, of course, is imagination. Imagination is inspired by curiosity, and then comes appreciation. And finally, that leads to creative thinking. So that curiosity has to always be alive. The best time of our life is our childhood. And the reason for that is really the fact that everything is new to us and we are so curious in finding things. As we grow older, things wear out. This curiosity wears out. Been there, done that. The reality is that every time you look at something, there are still layers of deeper layers that you can look at it, and always it's new. So don't lose your childhood. Continue with it. I love this saying by Einstein, we act as though comfort and luxury were the chief requirements of life, when what we need to be happy really is being enthusiastic about something. Well, my time is over, but this is the overall picture of creativity in my based on my experience. What I advise my students to avoid is rat race, comparing yourself with others. Competition, being competitive is the worst thing, in my opinion, for creativity. So the trouble with rat race is that even if you win, you're still a rat. You should race alone against your time toward your grand vision with the aim of leaving a lasting legacy. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Khoshnevis. Our last distinguished speaker and the moderator of this panel, Dr. Professor Nayereh Tohidi.
Thank you. Before I call our
speakers of the last panel to come over here to discuss and answer your questions. I was asked, without me expecting, to say also a few things. But being a social scientist, I was wondering, what am I doing here? Because mostly the wonderful talks from each one, I learned a few things and was very inspiring. And I should thank the organizers and everything. But most of them have been on hard science, technology, and engineering, and so forth, except for a few which showed the thoughtfulness of the organizers who made it diverse and inclusive. And one of the social scientists, humanists who couldn't come, Professor Firuze Kashani-Sabit, was also another evidence that you were trying to be inclusive and not limit this idea of being innovative and innovation of Iranian American community to only hard sciences and tech. So, after just listening to all of you, I learned that actually some of the points and conclusions you made are very much useful for social sciences and humanities. And as Dr. Yousef Bozorgnia put it, no matter what field of studies or what discipline, the process of innovation and the characteristics of being innovative are the same, be it in humanities or social sciences and in other fields. So, and also as Mr. Yazdani listed, Babak Yazdani, whom, by the way, I was really inspired by. Is he here still? Mr. Yazdani? He left. Very deep and thoughtful talk. He listed the characteristics of innovative people, specifically entrepreneurs. And I was thinking, as a psychologist, sociologist, educational psychologist especially, who cares for education and emphasizes social aspects of education, how we as professors, as educators, can enable innovation, can create more creativity in each field that we do research or teach. For example, there came the issue of gender here. How we can make more of people like Maryam Mirzakhani. Why there aren't that many women in the STEM fields and in science, or why they are not even as much achievement oriented. You know, we were talking about, Mr. Yazdani was correctly saying that, you know, for successful entrepreneurship and innovation, gender, race, religion, even ability, those things don't matter. But unfortunately, which should be the way he described, but unfortunately for many generations, those factors have mattered. As somebody mentioned here during one of the panels, about maybe 60 years ago, 70 years ago, Harvard University would not allow female students to use the main library. So they had to create Radcliffe College for women only. It was just for girls. And they had their own library because they didn't want to mix women and men in the scientific library. And they believed that women are, even when I was a student, I did my master's thesis on something innovative, which was try to find out why women, they keep saying in my literature that I'm studying, and many professors and researchers were trying to challenge that idea, that women are by and large affiliated oriented, and men by and large achievement oriented. They are into competition. They have the aspiration for achievement. They have career aspirations. Women don't. Women are mostly concerned with affiliation, with relationship, with family raising, and so forth. So it took years of studying and including my own thesis, which was published in the best journal of that time, to try to find out, they called it sex differences then, and the journal was Psychology of Sex Differences, why boys and girls do not have the same degree of achievement orientation or need for achievement. So, and then there was, by sociologists, some great books written about achieving societies, which again, as a social scientist, the application of this, all our discussion today is how we can apply all these ideas to Iran, for example, because again, during my student time, the argument was that the third world countries, underdeveloped countries, have more female characteristics, while the first world countries, the achieving societies, had more masculine and male characteristics. They are achievers, they have independence is valued, leadership is valued, competition is valued. And as Mr. Yazdani correctly said, in our culture, we don't celebrate, for example, entrepreneurship. We don't know much about business people. So these are I mean, there are some cultural problems that we as people coming from Iran and societies like Iran have, but it's not only culture. We cannot blame everything on culture. So, but it is, I'm not going to take much time here because it's itself a very big area of research, that how to make a society more achieving, but also how to define achievement. What is achievement? As Professor, our last great speaker, Professor Khoshnevis said, if achievement means only winning, then you are another rat, right? So then that's why in development studies, we are totally not redefining and changing the criteria and indexes for development. And we are talking about human development rather than just economic growth and all that. So I was just mentioning these few things to say that innovation and all these discussions you had today are as applicable to humanities and social sciences as much as other fields, because it's there in our fields that we are going to answer the question of why. Why then we don't, how can we make more innovative people? How can we educate people to become and motivate people to become better achievers and more innovative rather than conformist and so forth. Okay, so maybe since I know people are getting tired, let's start calling our panelists and have some discussions among us. Please, professors. So maybe I can start with one question myself and then have the audience to engage with you, and you can also engage among yourselves. So how can we enable innovation? Maybe each of you in your field can answer that question, which was actually posed by one of the speakers in the morning.
My field, of course, is engineering, and innovation to us means, as I mentioned, I was personally surprised to see the type of work that has been happened that has made major difference in the United States, which has a significant impact. I think the way things have worked in engineering most of the time was, and as I look at our graduates and everybody else, is as Mark Twain's statement, Dr. Khoshnevis indicated, really the British system that resulted into having a classroom and teaching a classroom and people think they're responsible for the content really destroyed the whole concept of innovation. I think if you go back to, if every person takes responsibility that says, I'm being given a gift of existence and I have a responsibility to do something, and education is just an opportunity to learn a few things. What can I do? What can I contribute? Now, this can happen to some extent when you have good mentors. But most of the time, when I look at the graduates coming and going, I think they're missing the boat, because I think they're satisfied with having a prescribed level of education, and they just graduate, they go. They just don't even think that they have a responsibility to come up with something new. So I think, in my opinion, in engineering, more than anything else, is the mentorship. Sometimes you're fortunate to have the proper mentor in academia to actually guide you in that direction. Sometimes you don't. But I think it's the responsibility of the academicians to provide that mentorship to the extent they can, also responsibility of the students to seek those kind of mentors. And that could happen.
Do you want me to address that or take a question from the audience?
Let's each of you address this question if you want.
Sure.
You don't have to.
I'll be brief because I know it's late in the afternoon and people are getting restless. I think, how do you enable innovation was the question. And what I've noticed in my career has been the times where I've actually been the new kid in, say, the new assignment I was at the district attorney's office, or new on the bench, or new on the board of various organizations. Interestingly, that time was when it was a time for innovation, because I had fresh perspective. Or when I wasn't the new person, but I saw another new person come in where they had fresh perspective. Now, this is without the ego of somebody saying, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to change everything. I don't mean that. I just mean coming into everything with a fresh perspective and not necessarily just accepting status quo, but also seeing it through the prism of somebody that questions, well, why is it being done this way, and how can it be done better? How can it be done differently? So I would say my takeaway would be to come in with a fresh perspective and see if you can improve on the status quo. And then to briefly touch on your point about mentorship, I wanted to challenge everybody who was a panelist here today to meet with at least one potential mentee this afternoon, because I think that's how we can foster these relationships and elevate our next generation. And I also wanted to say, I don't see her right now, she was here, but one of my summer interns, another law student who was very instrumental in the research that I provided during my talk. She's over there. I wanted to give her a shout out, Kimia Kujuri, and she is one of my mentees, and I think that I wanted everybody to applaud her for the wonderful research she did, which was the basis for my talk. Thank you.
We have very little time left, so would you like to comment on that question, or shall we move on?
So I think the best way to get people started, they have to start. They have to have a problem. You have to put a challenge in front of them. So, as they say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. If you don't take that step, if you constantly contemplate or take comfort in using available solutions, you'll never be innovative. You have to really be forced to think outside the box, to think new stuff. And this is a situation where it's not necessarily very comfortable. And the entire evolution, biological evolution, takes place when conditions become uncomfortable, when the species have to either get extinct or mutate, generate something new, right? So we cannot have a situation of leisure without much practical challenges and then expect innovation or creativity. So that's basically like in my company now, we have a lot of challenges. We can take comfort in using what is available, which most likely are not going to be good solutions or compromises. or we really have to find new solutions that have not been there before. And it is hard. We have a lot of failures, but once in a while, we have innovations that really break new ground. Not only in our discipline, they have applications in other disciplines.
Very briefly, in our discipline, earthquake engineering and science, to tell you the truth, enabling innovation and creativity is easy because the impact is enormous. A little bit doing a new job is going to create lots of good things for the community. So we are in good shape because of the subject.
Okay. Go back now to questions.
He's been, the gentleman was there first.
Thank you. Judge, I want to ask you if the new collaborative courts have been duplicated in other states because of such great success in California.
Yes, excellent question. California is actually one of the leading states in collaborative courts, but because it is such a great model, it is being duplicated and replicated throughout the country. But California has been leading, as it usually is in a lot of industries. Yes.
So in light of efficiency and time, I'm just posing two targeted questions. First for Your Honor, Judge Nahal, and second for Professor Khoshnevis. For Your Honor, I have a question. I know this is amazing what you mentioned, collaborative, but almost every psychologist will tell you the whole thing, you can't just, when the offender gets back to their family, there's a chance that they get back to their own tribe or you need to go full cycle. And what I'm getting at is that there's a hard data for countries like Netherlands, the Scandinavian, that are under, their prisons are totally sparse. Have we looked as a person who's sitting on the other side of the table, have you looked at this hard data and try to mimic their model to regulate and basically regulate these substances and legalize these substances to basically see if we can get the same amount, same results that it's been like, it is scientifically proven, like it's been tried and true, right, in different countries. We don't need to, it's not like something that, it's not hit and miss, or it's not like R&D, it's been already done.
Yes. And when you're talking, I think there was two questions embedded in there. One had to do with the general model in Netherlands or other countries. Another one had to do with substances. You mentioned the word substance. Do you mean with respect to illicit substances?
I'm sorry. So basically, like a lot of criminal, a lot of prisoners that we have in our system, most of the, I don't know, I was Googling, I couldn't find I found the 1997 statistics results, which was huge difference between the use of substances, like basically the population, the imprisoned population, California versus Netherlands, and like how their prison system is under prison, and ours is over prison. Basically, we are.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So basically, a lot of petty crimes that we have, and then we populate our prisons and all that. That's my question, actually.
Yes.
One question. And for Mr. Khoshnevis, what I want to ask you is that how do you recommend or prescribe some tangible action items for some engineers to go pursue their passion and not worry about rat race? Because you are in a company, most of the companies that we work in, they actually need, it's a very rigorous feedback cycle. They need you to perform, and you can't just say, I'm meditating, or I'm just like in my happiness. They just kick you out the day after. So I want to figure out what are the tangible action items that you can do to go to that release. Thank you.
So Proposition 47, which was passed by California voters, had to do with, I'm not sure where the person who asked the question was. Okay. California, Proposition 47 specifically tried to address what you're raising, that for people that are low-level offenders, to give them treatment as opposed to incarcerating them, and specifically with respect to drugs and substances. What used to be, for example, felony possession of methamphetamine is now just a misdemeanor. And unless the substances are possessed for sale, they're misdemeanors, low-level offenders. Only if it's possessed for sales are they classified as felonies. So that's one example of how California and also Governor Brown, through a lot of bail reform and a lot of new policy that's being passed, is trying to address rehabilitation for low-level offenders and address the needs of low-level offenders, and then only incarcerate serious and violent offenders, or what's called strike criminals, in prison. And I could teach a semester on this, but I have to keep my comments brief.
Okay. Your question was a very good one. There is really no quick fix method, but there are very strong attitude-oriented aspects to creativity. And I think regardless of what your environment is, whether you're working for your own little company or you're within an organization, within a corporate system, what I said, in my opinion, is universal. Competition is not good. Competition is making yourself like others. You compete on things that are comparable. Creativity is really concerning doing things that are brand new, no comparison with anything else. Okay, so if we embrace this kind of attitude, that we have to be unique, and whatever comes out of me has to really be from me. That way you kind of isolate yourself from the political noise that is around you. The success may not be very frequent, but when it happens, it's very significant and people will take notice of it. Another thing is lifestyle. So therefore, the first one has to do with your value system. What is important to you? The second one is lifestyle. And by lifestyle, there are certain things that you can really do to induce visual thinking, creative thinking, taking time to be curious about nature, whatever it is that absorbs you. For example, I like arts very much. I go to museums, I do painting, I do drawing, I love poetry, I read a lot of these things. People don't believe that, you know, I'm such a dry technical guy, but in fact, the creative side of me gets a big boost by getting engaged in arts. I'm not necessarily saying that this is the prescription for you. You may have other things. It may be sports or whatever it is. There are a lot of creativity in all sports. In everything, there is a creative way of doing it as well. So,
Thank you very much. Last question.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I know we are very short in time. First, I'd like to thank all the panelists and the organizers for such an inspiring and innovating program. And I'd like to pose my question to Professor Ershaghi. And surprisingly, I like to be innovative, and the question is not related to your topic. I know you wear many hats, and besides your professional career, you have decades of leadership experience in community. And the question is, how can we apply innovation to leadership in Persian community organizations? To further explain, I would like to tell you, based on my own experience being involved in community organizations, I've noticed that many times we see leadership to play as a controlling factor instead of making change, as Mr. Yazani said. And the principle of authority and responsibility going hand by hand is not actually practicing in many community organizations of Iranian heritage. So I would like to know, in your opinion, what do you think is the reason and how we can improve that? Thank you.
I know we don't have much time, so I'll just say then a very brief response to you. Based on my personal experience, I think that the population that immigrated from Iran, my age, you're going to have a problem with them, because we grew up in an environment that we were not given the opportunity, and we were given the opportunity. We were so insecure, we wanted to control the whole thing. But having 3 children and 8 grandchildren, I can tell you, I see a different atmosphere for them. I see a different attitude, and I'm very, very positive and very encouraged to see that the young generations growing up in this environment, seeing example, will be much better leaders, not trying to control, not trying to be autocratic, and actually run the organization very efficiently. So I think that the past generation is a lost cause, but the new generation is hopeful.
I just wanted to add to that, if I may. I was involved with PAIA, Public Affairs Alliance of Iranian Americans, and one of the goals was community building. And it was such a challenge for building community, because there's a lot of conspiracy theories in our culture. But I wanted to point out that individually, we're like our basmati rice, or individually we're like beautiful, long grain with saffron on top. But we need to get more cohesive and be like sticky rice, if I can use that analogy. And I see that in the past 10 years or so, since I've been involved with community building, it truly has emerged from being like just focused on our individual successes to now building as a community and becoming a lot more cohesive. And I think events like this speak volumes for how cohesive our community is becoming. So thank you to the organizers.
One last thing, mentorship. If anyone in this room, young or old, even in chemistry, you are interested in earthquake engineering and science, send me an email. We work with you.
Okay, I think this conference itself and the organizers who are younger, and some of them second generation, itself is an evidence of the change that you mentioned and the way that everything was organized. And so thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming, and I leave the mic to you for